Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson is a game-changing call to rethink America's future. Tackling housing, climate, and innovation crises, it argues for a liberalism that builds, not blocks. With sharp insights, the authors expose how outdated regulations stifle progress and propose a politics of plenty to deliver affordable homes, clean energy, and bold public projects. A New York Times bestseller, it's a hopeful, practical guide for Democrats and beyond to overcome scarcity and shape a thriving tomorrow. Amazon links to buy in description. Protect your eyes from the sun with stylish state-of-the-art sunglasses from COSTA. See what's out there. Click and buy anything within 24 hours on Amazon to earn a small commission for Quick Savant, which he will use to feed his multiple rescue dogs.
COSTA sunglasses. See what's out there.
Abundance, a non-fiction book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson published by Avid Reader Press in March 2025, presents a compelling and paradigm-shifting call to reimagine American liberalism through a lens of growth, innovation, and supply-side progressivism. Described as a #1 New York Times bestseller, the book critiques the systemic failures of liberal governance that have led to scarcity in critical areas like housing, labor, energy, and infrastructure, while proposing a bold abundance agenda to overcome these challenges. Drawing on their expertise as prominent journalists, Klein as a New York Times columnist and podcast host, and Thompson as a staff writer at The Atlantic, the authors synthesize policy analysis, historical context, and cultural critique to argue for a politics of plenty that prioritizes building and inventing to meet societal needs. The book has sparked significant debate, praised for its clarity and optimism but criticized for its selective focus and potential deregulatory leanings. The following is a detailed summary of its key themes, arguments, and proposals. Core thesis: a politics of scarcity versus abundance. The central thesis of abundance is deceptively simple: to have the future we want, we need to build and invent more of what we need. The authors argue that the 21st century has been defined by a pervasive sense of unaffordability and shortage, not due to inherent resource constraints but because of deliberate policy choices and cultural attitudes that prioritize preservation over progress. They trace this politics of scarcity to a liberal governance model that, since the 1970s, has focused on protecting against the excesses of growth, such as environmental degradation or unchecked urban development, while neglecting to build enough to meet modern demands. This has resulted in crises across multiple sectors. Housing: decades of restrictive zoning laws and local opposition to development have led to a national housing crisis, with insufficient new construction driving unaffordability. For example, the authors note that while Texas authorized twice as many homes as California since 2015 despite a smaller population, 30% of American adults are house poor, spending over 30% of their income on housing. Labor: policies limiting immigration have created worker shortages, exacerbating economic bottlenecks. Energy and climate: despite warnings about climate change, the U.S. has failed to build adequate clean energy infrastructure, such as solar, wind, or nuclear power, due to regulatory hurdles and environmentalist opposition to development. Infrastructure and innovation: ambitious public projects, like high-speed rail, are delayed or abandoned due to excessive red tape, while scientific innovation is stifled by risk-averse funding systems, such as the NIH peer review process, which discourages novel research. Klein and Thompson argue that these shortages are chosen scarcities, rooted in a progressive mindset that excels at identifying problems but struggles to solve them. They critique liberalism's tendency to create complex regulations, originally designed to protect the public, that now hinder progress, such as environmental reviews that make it easier to frack for gas than to build solar panels. The authors contrast this with moments of effective governance, like the rapid development of COVID vaccines, to show what's possible when government prioritizes action over process. COSTA sunglasses, click image to shop. Historical and cultural context. The book situates its argument within a historical arc, tracing how post-1970s liberalism shifted from the bold, building-oriented progressivism of the New Deal or the 1960s space race to a more cautious, risk-averse stance. Klein and Thompson argue that liberals, reacting to the excesses of mid-20th century industrialization, e.g., pollution, urban sprawl, crafted regulations like the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, and local zoning laws to curb reckless development. However, these tools have been co-opted by wealthy homeowners and entrenched interests to block new projects, creating a vetocracy where progress is stalled by endless veto points. Culturally, the authors diagnose a progressive aversion to technology and growth, particularly after the 2016 election, when tech billionaires and social media platforms were blamed for political polarization and Trump's rise. This has led to a broader suspicion of innovation, which Klein and Thompson see as counterproductive. They evoke the techno-optimism of the 1964 New York World's Fair, with visions of moon flights and ocean floor hotels, to argue that liberalism should rediscover its ambition to build a better future. The Abundance Agenda, Policy Proposals. The second half of Abundance outlines a policy framework to shift from scarcity to plenty, emphasizing practical, supply-side solutions over ideological purity. Key proposals include housing reform, streamline zoning regulations to allow more construction, especially in high-demand urban areas. The authors advocate for both deregulation, e.g., reducing single-family zoning, and public investment in social housing to increase supply. Energy and climate, accelerate clean energy projects by reforming environmental review processes like NEPA and COSTA, which delay solar, wind, and nuclear projects. They also support nuclear power and vertical farming to address climate and food security. Immigration. Adopt more flexible immigration policies to address labor shortages, arguing that closing borders does not create jobs but stifles economic growth. Scientific innovation, reform the NIH and other funding bodies to prioritize high-risk, high-reward research. The authors criticize the current system for favoring established researchers and safe bets, which stifles breakthroughs. Infrastructure, reduce administrative burdens on public projects, such as the 60-plus federal review processes for infrastructure, to build high-speed rail, transit, and other critical systems efficiently. The authors emphasize that the Abundance Agenda is not about deregulation for its own sake but about choosing the right tools, whether government-led investment or regulatory reform, to achieve tangible outcomes. They argue that progressivism should focus on results, e.g., more housing, rather than rigid adherence to big or small government ideologies. Critiques and limitations. While Abundance has been lauded for its clarity, accessibility, and optimistic vision, David Brooks called it spectacular and Fareed Zakaria deemed it powerful and persuasive. It has also faced criticism for its blind spots and ambiguities. Trade-off denial. Critics argue that Klein and Thompson sidestep the hard trade-offs of their proposals. For instance, loosening environmental regulations could harm ecosystems, and the authors offer little framework for balancing production against pollution. Corporate influence. Some reviewers, like Hannah Story Brown, contend that the book underplays how powerful industries profit from scarcity, e.g., real estate developers benefiting from housing shortages, and risks endorsing a deregulatory agenda that could favor corporate interests over the public good. Selective focus. The authors are criticized for ignoring progressive thinkers like Kate Raworth or Naomi Klein, who address abundance through degrowth or equitable distribution, and for focusing on a narrow, technocratic vision that may not resonate with broader leftist concerns. Political feasibility. Proposals like reducing homeowner veto power over development or reforming entrenched scientific funding systems face resistance from powerful constituencies, which the authors acknowledge but don't fully address. U.S.-centric view. While the book focuses on American policy, some note its lessons apply to other developed economies, though its U.S.-centric framing limits its global perspective. Political and cultural implications. Abundance is explicitly aimed at revitalizing a demoralized Democratic Party, offering a counter-narrative to the politics of scarcity championed by figures like Donald Trump, who emphasize economic hardship and closed borders. The authors see their agenda as a way to unite liberals and pro-growth conservatives around a shared goal of building more, citing bipartisan potential in housing reform, e.g., Texas and California passing similar zoning laws. However, they acknowledge intercoalitional fights within the Democratic Party, as unions, environmentalists, and minority-owned businesses defend regulations that slow progress but protect their interests. The book's optimistic tone and focus on a liberalism that builds have resonated with the coastal want class, with predictions that abundance could become a democratic buzzword by 2028. Yet, its timing, published during a constitutional crisis and Trump's second term, has led critics to question its relevance amid rising authoritarianism and deregulatory agendas co-opting the abundance rhetoric for pro-polluter policies. Reception and impact. Abundance has garnered significant attention, with over 870 Goodreads reviews and endorsements from figures like David Brooks and Samuel Moyn, who praised its potential to inspire Democrats to think big again. However, progressive critics like Mike Conchal argue that its broad framing muddles distinct policy challenges, while others see it as inadvertently aligning with libertarian or tech sector agendas. The book's intellectual origins, Klein's 2021 op-ed on supply-side progressivism and Thompson's 2022 abundance agenda essay, have fueled a growing movement, with new organizations and funding emerging to push these ideas. Conclusion. Abundance is a bold manifesto that challenges liberals to move beyond defensive, process-oriented governance toward a proactive, building-focused progressivism. By diagnosing the roots of scarcity in housing, labor, energy, and innovation, Klein and Thompson offer a hopeful vision of a future where clean energy, affordable homes, and groundbreaking technologies are within reach, if only we can overcome regulatory sclerosis and ideological rigidity. While its policy prescriptions are detailed and its prose accessible, the book's optimism is tempered by critiques of its failure to fully grapple with trade-offs, corporate power, and political realities. Nonetheless, Abundance stands as a provocative call to rethink how we solve problems, urging a shift from lamenting scarcity to creating plenty.
COSTA sunglasses. See what's out there.